The boy of two worlds. The beginning of a legend. Imagine a boy who was born surrounded by the ocean, with the sound of the waves crashing on the shore and the sea breeze caressing his face. Now imagine that same boy was raised in a completely different place, where the icy winds cut through the skin and the fields are endless. This is the story of Jason Momoa. Jason was born on August 1, 1979 in Honolulu, Hawaii, a true paradise. But his childhood was not spent on sunny beaches, surfing or diving in the crystal blue sea. When he was still very young, his mother, Connie Lemke, decided to move with him to the interior of the United States in Norwalk, Iowa. Now think about it. On one side we have Hawaii with its lush landscapes, rich culture and people full of stories. On the other, Iowa, a place where winters are harsh, the fields stretch as far as the eye can see and life is much more peaceful. Jason grew up divided between these two worlds. But that wasn't a bad thing. Quite the opposite. This mix of cultures helped shape him, making him a different boy, full of energy who didn't fit into the mold. He was strong, fearless and always looking for new adventures. Since he was little, he felt like he didn't belong to just one place but to the whole world. If you could choose, where would you rather grow up? In the heat of Hawaii or in the tranquility of the American countryside? But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss any updates. Like and share with your friends. Take the opportunity to leave a comment below and tell me what you thought. The adventurous spirit. The discovery that would change your life. Now imagine a boy who couldn't sit still. While other children were content to play in the backyard or play video games indoors, Jason Momoa wanted to explore the world. He was the kind of person who wasn't afraid to take risks, who saw a tall tree and thought, "I'm going to climb to the top." Ever since he was a child, his energy seemed to have no limits. He would run through the fields of Iowa like a warrior on a great journey. His imagination was fertile, and he was always looking for new ways to challenge himself. If he had a bike, he wanted to jump off ramps. If he saw a wall, he wanted to climb it. He wouldn't accept an ordinary life. But deep down, something seemed missing. The strong, adventurous boy felt like he didn't quite belong there. His father, Joseph Momoa, was a full-blooded Hawaiian, a talented artist and painter who told stories about his roots, about Hawaiian warriors, about the gods of the ocean, and about the indomitable spirit of the Hawaiian people. Jason listened to every word as if they were legends from a distant past. He felt that calling, but he didn't quite understand what it meant. It was only when he grew up a little more and finally returned to Hawaii to spend time with his father that something inside him awakened. As soon as he stepped onto the warm sand of the beach, he felt a different energy. He saw the surfers challenging the giant waves, he saw the elders chanting ancient chants, and he realized that this place ran through his veins. There, he was not just a boy from the American countryside. He was Jason Momoa, a descendant of Hawaiian warriors. It was at that moment that he discovered who he really was. From that moment on, everything changed. He no longer wanted to be just another boy. He wanted to be someone great. And even without knowing exactly how, he felt that he was destined for something greater. Have you ever felt that you were born for something great but still don't know exactly what? The stroke of destiny, from waiter to runway model. Now imagine this young man full of energy who always liked to go on adventures and test his limits. But like any other boy growing up in rural America, he needed to find a path, something that would lead him to a promising future. But Jason didn't want an ordinary life. Working in an office? No way. Sitting all day without moving? That wasn't for him. He wanted something that would challenge his adventurous spirit. So he started working in simple jobs like many young people do. He was a waiter, a shop assistant, and did whatever he could to earn his money. But fate had other plans for him. One day, while working as a waiter in a surf shop in Hawaii, something unexpected happened. A fashion scout saw him and was impressed by his height, his athletic build, and his striking features. "Have you ever thought about being a model?" they asked him. Jason laughed. Model? That had never crossed his mind. But the scout insisted, "You have a unique look. You should try it." And even though he didn't take it seriously at first, he accepted the challenge. For all, why not? He's always been one to take on new things. That's how in 1999 Jason Momoa entered the world of fashion. And it didn't take long for him to become a success. He entered competitions and ended up winning the Best Model in Hawaii award, a title that put him in the spotlight. His imposing presence and natural charisma caught the attention of big brands, and suddenly he was walking the runway and posing for campaigns. But there was a problem. Jason didn't want to be just a model. For him, that was just a path, an opportunity for something bigger. He wanted more. Much more. And then fate took another turn. While he was involved in fashion, a new opportunity appeared. And this one would change his life forever. From model to actor. The first big role. Now imagine Jason Momoa, a young Hawaiian full of energy, recently emerged from obscurity after being discovered as a model. He had a unique look, a striking presence and a charisma that made people look at him wherever he went. But he knew he didn't want to spend the rest of his life just posing for photos. That's when fate presented him with another great opportunity. In the late 90s, an audition was being held for one of the most famous series of the time, Baywatch Hawaii. Yes, Baywatch, that series that showed lifeguards running along the beaches in red swimsuits while saving people from drowning. The producers were looking for someone with an authentic Hawaiian look, someone who looked like he belonged on those beaches. And who better than Jason Momoa? But there was one problem. Jason had never acted before. He had never taken a theater course, he had never stood in front of a camera to play a character. Even so, he decided to give it a try. He went to the audition and with his charisma and imposing physique, he got the role. He would play Jason Ione, one of the team's lifeguards. And suddenly his life changed completely. Jason spent 2 full seasons on the show between 1999 and 2001. For a young man who had never acted before, it was a great training ground. He learned how to behave in front of the camera, how to project his voice, how to move on screen. But there was something that bothered him. He knew that Baywatch was not the kind of show that would turn him into a respected actor. At the time, the series was famous for its exaggerated aesthetic, its toned bodies and beach action scenes, not exactly the place where an actor could show his true dramatic ability. And over time, Jason realized that he wanted more. He wanted roles that challenged him, that would show the world what he was really capable of. But reality knocked on the door. After Baywatch Hawaii ended, the opportunities simply disappeared. Hollywood didn't seem interested in him. No. What to do when everything seems to be going wrong? Jason would have to fight even harder to conquer his space. And that battle was just beginning. Have you ever had a moment when you thought you were on the right path but realized you needed something more? Well, that's exactly how Jason felt. The dream falls apart. The fight to stay in the game. Now imagine that you finally got what you wanted. You got into TV, worked on a famous series, became known to the world. But suddenly it all ended. That's exactly what happened to Jason Momoa. When Baywatch Hawaii ended in 2001, Jason found himself faced with a huge challenge. What to do now? He thought that after appearing on TV, new job offers would come naturally. But the reality of Hollywood wasn't that simple. The agents, directors and producers didn't take him seriously. To them, Jason was nothing more than a pretty face from a series that, despite being popular, didn't require great acting. And then came the hard part. Jason was out of work. He auditioned for new roles, but no one wanted him. He began to doubt himself. Was he really an actor? Was this the right path for him? But Jason wasn't the type to give up easily. He realized that if he wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, he needed to reinvent himself. He couldn't just wait for Hollywood to give him a chance. He had to prepare himself to be a real actor. That's when he made an unexpected decision. He stepped away from the entertainment world to study acting for real. He began to delve deeper into the art of theater, studying drama, learning acting techniques, and even traveling to France and Nepal, where he encountered new cultures, learned about cinema from different parts of the world, and connected with his spirituality. This break was essential. Jason began to see acting not just as a job but as an art. But the money was running out. In Hollywood, if you're not working, no one remembers you. And Jason began to face financial difficulties. He urgently needed to find a new job, or his career would end before it even really began. And that was when a new door opened, an opportunity that could finally take him out of anonymity. But would he be able to seize this chance? Or would it just be another frustration? Stargate Atlantis, the door to science fiction. Now imagine that you spent years trying to establish yourself as an actor. You were successful in a series, became famous, but then no one wanted to hire you anymore. You studied, prepared, traveled to learn new techniques. But the film industry seemed to have forgotten your name. That's exactly what happened to Jason Momoa. But he didn't give up. He kept auditioning, insisting, until in 2005, a new opportunity arose. A science fiction series called Stargate Atlantis was looking for a new character. And here's an interesting detail. Jason almost didn't get the role. The producers were unsure who to cast as Ronan Dex, a lone warrior who survived an alien invasion and would become one of the show's main characters. Jason wasn't the obvious choice because the character didn't originally sound like him. But just as he did when he auditioned for Game of Thrones years later, he found a way to stand out. When he arrived for the audition, Jason did something unusual. He showed up barefoot with ripped clothes, loose hair, and a wild look in his eyes. He had embodied the warrior Ronan Dex before he even got the part. And that's what won the producers over. They saw in him someone who wasn't just a pretty face but a true warrior. And Jason finally got a new TV role, a character that perfectly suited his raw energy, imposing physique and fighting spirit. For 4 years from 2005 to 2009, Jason starred as Ronan Dex in Stargate Atlantis. He became one of the most beloved characters in the series, and for the first time, fans began to see him as a true action star. But despite the success of the series among science fiction fans, Hollywood still wasn't ready for Jason Momoa. He couldn't get movie roles and was still seen as an actor limited to TV series. And then an unexpected event changed his life forever. A brutal attack almost took him out of the spotlight forever. What happened? And how did it shape the Jason Momoa we know today? The violent turnaround, the attack that changed his life. Now imagine that you're finally starting to get recognized. After years of struggling, you've finally landed a role in a respected series. You feel like you're on the right track. But then, suddenly, everything can be taken away from you in the blink of an eye. That's exactly what happened to Jason Momoa. The year was 2008. Jason was already established as Ronan Dex in Stargate Atlantis and was beginning to dream of something bigger. He wanted better roles, he wanted to make it to the movies, he wanted to show the world that he was more than just a warrior on TV series. But on an ordinary night, everything changed brutally. Jason was in a bar in Los Angeles enjoying a night out with friends. Until out of nowhere an unknown man approached him and without warning violently attacked him with a broken beer glass. The shards of glass cut Jason's face deeply, leaving serious wounds that required 140 stitches. Yes, 140 stitches. The attack was so severe that doctors had to perform several surgeries to reconstruct part of his face. The risk of after effects was high. He could have lost some of his facial mobility, he could have been left with scars that would have made him lose any chance in the film industry. And that was when Jason had to make a decision. Would he give in to his fear or turn it into his strength? He chose the latter. Instead of hiding, he accepted his scars as part of his identity. And that was what made the difference. The marks on his face made him even more imposing, giving him a unique look that would later help shape some of the most iconic characters of his career. But at that moment, Jason didn't know it yet. He was at rock bottom. Hollywood was no longer giving him many opportunities. Now, with a scarred face, he feared his career would be over before it even took off. But he didn't give up. Then came the opportunity that would change his life forever. An audition for a new series. A series based on fantasy books. A series that, in the following years, would become one of the biggest productions in the history of TV. The name of this series? Game of Thrones. But would he get this role? Or would it just be another disappointment? Khal Drogo, the role that changed everything. Now imagine being in the most difficult moment of your life. You suffered a brutal attack, your face was scarred forever, and your career in Hollywood seems to be hanging by a thread. But in the middle of all this, a unique opportunity arises, a chance that could change everything. That's exactly what happened to Jason Momoa. In 2010, Hollywood was starting production on a series that promised to be something great. Based on the book series A Song of Ice and Fire, by author George R.R. Martin, this new HBO production wanted to bring to TV a dark, violent, and intrigue-filled medieval world. The name of this series? Game of Thrones. And among the characters in the plot, there was one in particular who was brutal, imposing, and legendary. Khal Drogo, the leader of the Dothraki warriors. The producers didn't know Jason Momoa. To them, he was just another unknown actor from a science fiction series. They weren't convinced that he could play a barbarian leader, feared and respected by thousands of warriors. But Jason wouldn't take no for an answer. So he decided he would do something unforgettable in his audition. Instead of simply reading the script and saying the characters' lines, he did something completely unexpected. Jason Momoa started dancing. But it wasn't just any dance. He did the haka, a traditional war dance of the Polynesian people. He beat his chest, shouted with fierce intensity, and showed the savagery of a true warrior in his eyes. The result? The producers were startled. Yes, startled. They had never seen anyone do something like that in an audition. But they were also impressed. In that moment, Jason wasn't just an actor auditioning. He was Khal Drogo. And that's how he got the role that would change his life forever. When Game of Thrones premiered in 2011, the entire world became obsessed with Khal Drogo. Even though he didn't speak a word of English in the series, his presence was colossal. He was a feared leader, a ruthless warrior, and at the same time he showed a sensitive side in his relationship with Daenerys Targaryen. The character became a favorite among the public, and suddenly Jason Momoa was no longer an unknown actor. He had finally conquered Hollywood. Despite Khal Drogo's overwhelming success, the character wouldn't last long on the series. After just one season, Jason was back to square one. Could he maintain this success? Or would his career just be a passing fad? The door to the movies, the first great protagonist. Now imagine that you finally got the role of your life. You played an unforgettable character, the whole world started to recognize you, and suddenly Hollywood is paying attention to you. But then, in the blink of an eye, your character dies in the series. That's exactly what happened to Jason Momoa in Game of Thrones. Even though he became one of the most iconic characters in the first season, Khal Drogo didn't last long in the plot. And as soon as his participation ended, Jason found himself without a job again. Now stop for a moment and think, what would you do in this situation? If it were anyone else, he could have accepted any small role just to keep appearing. But Jason didn't want just anything. He wanted something big. He wanted to star in a movie, he wanted to be an action star, he wanted to be on the big screen alongside the biggest names in Hollywood. And finally, an opportunity arose. The legendary character Conan the Barbarian was returning to the movies. If you know your movie history, you know that Arnold Schwarzenegger played the role in the 80s and helped turn Conan into an action classic. Now Hollywood wanted a new Conan, someone who could bring this legend back to life. And who better to play a muscular, brutal, and imposing warrior than Jason Momoa? When Jason got the lead role in Conan the Barbarian, 2011, he thought, now is my chance. Now my career is going to explode. But what happened? The movie was a box office flop. That's right. Despite all of Jason's efforts, despite the intense training he did for the role, despite the action and visual effects, the movie simply didn't do well. The critics panned the story and the audience didn't care for the movie. And once again, Jason was back to square one. But Jason Momoa is not the type to give up. He knew that the road to success was never easy. One failure didn't mean his career was over. He would keep trying until he got what he wanted. And then something unexpected happened. While his film career wasn't taking off as he wanted, his personal life was about to change completely. He met the woman of his dreams. And this story, my friend, is worthy of a fairy tale. Do you want to know how Jason Momoa won over Lisa Bonet, the woman he had admired since he was a child? The love for Lisa Bonet, a romance worthy of cinema. Now imagine that you are a young boy growing up in the middle of the United States, far from the spotlight, far from the big stars of cinema and TV. But one day you turn on the television and see a woman so incredible, so fascinating that you immediately think, one day I'm going to marry that woman. It seems impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened to Jason Momoa and Lisa Bonet. The first time Jason saw Lisa Bonet. The story begins in the 80s. Jason was still a child when he first watched the series The Cosby Show, one of the most popular TV shows of the time. And it was there, on the television screen, that he saw Lisa Bonet, the actress who played the charismatic and stylish Denise Huxtable. Jason was completely enchanted. At that moment, he didn't even dream of being an actor yet. He was just a boy, but something inside him said, this is the woman of my life. He never told anyone this, but from that day on, Lisa Bonet became his great platonic love. The day they met for the first time. Now cut to the year 2005. Jason was already a grown man trying to grow his career, but still without much success. He had already done Baywatch, Stargate Atlantis, and was fighting for new roles. It was then that, one random night, fate decided to intervene. Jason was in a jazz bar in Los Angeles and suddenly, Lisa Bonet walked in. Yes, Lisa Bonet. The woman he had admired since he was a child. The woman he thought was impossible to meet, let alone date. Now think about it. What would you do if you met the person of your dreams in front of you? Jason could have stopped, he could have gotten nervous, he could have missed the opportunity. But he didn't waste his chance. He plucked up the courage and went to talk to her. The beginning of an unexpected love. Lisa Bonet was already a mature woman, older than Jason. She had already been married to the famous singer Lenny Kravitz and had a daughter, Zoe Kravitz, who would later become a famous actress as well. She had a different energy, a strong spirituality, a striking presence. And to Jason's surprise, she was also interested in him. That night, they went out together and went to a restaurant to eat tacos. Lisa laughed at Jason's jokes, was enchanted by his spontaneous and authentic way. That was when Jason realized he was no longer in front of the platonic love of his childhood. He was getting to know the real woman, the person behind the TV star. And he fell even more in love. A love story built at the right time. They started dating, and over time they built a solid and true relationship. Jason always spoke proudly about Lisa. He said she was the most incredible woman he had ever met. In interviews, he said that she taught him to be a better man, to be calmer, more spiritual, more connected to life. And Lisa also fell in love with Jason's genuine and protective side. He wasn't just a handsome and strong guy. He was someone who wanted to take care of his family, protect those he loved, and create a home full of love. In 2007, they had their first daughter, Lola Iolani Momoa. And in 2008, their son Nukuwolf Manakawapo Namakiha Momoa was born. Jason was a completely doting father. He always made a point of being present in his children's lives, teaching them about Hawaiian culture, the importance of family, and how to be strong and kind at the same time. But something was still missing. The wedding that took 12 years to happen. Even though they had been together for over 12 years, Jason and Lisa had not yet officially married. For them, marriage was not just a show. They were already a family and they loved each other deeply. But in 2017, they decided to make it official and got married in a low-key ceremony. Jason was fulfilled. He had married the woman of his dreams, built a beautiful family, and finally his career was starting to take off. But life always has its challenges in store for us. Even though they are one of the most beloved couples in Hollywood, their love has been tested over time. In 2022, after 17 years together, Jason and Lisa announced their separation. The news took the world by surprise as they had always seemed so happy. But Jason made it clear. They still deeply respect each other and will continue to be a family. Even though they were separated, Lisa will always be the woman who changed Jason's life. And in the meantime, he had another big battle ahead of him. The biggest chance of his career was about to arrive. The role that would make him a global star. The moment he would become Aquaman. Want to know how Jason Momoa became the king of the seas and conquered the world with this character? The call of the ocean. The birth of Aquaman. Now imagine that you spent years struggling to stand out. You started as a model, did TV series, faced rejections, suffered a brutal attack, and finally got a leading role in Game of Thrones. But despite his success as Khal Drogo, Hollywood still didn't see Jason Momoa as a big movie star. That's when fate intervened once again. The DC Comics universe was booming in theaters. After the success of Man of Steel 2013, directed by Zack Snyder, the studio began planning a film about the Justice League, bringing the most iconic comic book heroes to the big screen. And one of those heroes was someone who, up until that point, had never been taken seriously in the movies. Aquaman. Now let's be honest. Before Jason Momoa, who took Aquaman seriously. In the comics and animations, he was portrayed as a blonde hero with an orange and green uniform who talked to fish. Many people saw him as the weakest character in the Justice League. But Zack Snyder had a different vision. He wanted to transform Aquaman into a true king of the seas, someone powerful, imposing, someone who looked like a warrior straight from the depths of the ocean. And that's where Jason Momoa came into the story. Jason's first reaction to the invitation. Jason Momoa was called for a casting call, but he didn't know what role he was for. When he arrived at the studio, Zack Snyder looked at him and said, "Do you know why you're here?" Jason, a little confused, replied, "I think I'm going to play a villain." But Zack smiled and said, "No man, you're going to be Aquaman." At that moment, Jason was shocked. He never imagined he would play a superhero, especially one like Aquaman. But Zack Snyder saw something that no one else did. Jason Momoa had the perfect look, presence, and intensity to reinvent the character. He would no longer be just the guy who talks to fish. He would be a king, a warrior, a true god of the oceans. And Jason accepted the challenge. The first appearance as Aquaman. The first time the public saw Jason as Aquaman was in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice 2016, in a quick scene, but which already showed a completely different character than what fans were used to. Then, in 2017 came Justice League, where Jason finally had a bigger role as Arthur Curry Aquaman. Despite the film's problems, which went through reshoots and wasn't as successful as expected, the audience loved Jason Momoa in the role. He was fun, strong, charismatic, and above all, imposing. It was enough to guarantee a solo film for the hero. And that's when the big turning point in Jason Momoa's career came. Aquaman 2018. The movie that changed everything. Directed by James Wan, Aquaman was released in 2018 and became an absurd success. The film grossed over $1 billion at the box office, becoming DC's biggest hit to date. And the best part? Jason Momoa became a global star. Now he was no longer just the guy from Game of Thrones. He was no longer a former model trying his luck in the movies. He was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Aquaman completely changed the public's view of the character. He was now a fearless king, a warrior, someone with depth and personality. And as a bonus, Jason finally achieved something he had wanted for a long time: to represent his Hawaiian roots in a big movie. Polynesian culture directly influenced the way he played the character, from his movements to Aquaman's look and attitude. What came next? With the success of Aquaman, Jason established himself as one of the most popular actors today. He began receiving offers for bigger films, starred in the Apple TV Plus series C, participated in the epic Dune 2021, and returned as Aquaman in new DC films. But his journey is not over yet. With the future of DC changing and new challenges arising, what's next for Jason Momoa? Will he continue as Aquaman? Or will his next role be even bigger? The global success, from Justice League to solo film. Now imagine that you spent years fighting to be recognized. You faced rejections, financial difficulties, had your face forever scarred by a brutal attack, and for a long time Hollywood simply didn't believe in you. But now everything has changed. After his first appearance in Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice 2016, and a bigger role in Justice League 2017, Jason Momoa finally became a movie star. And then, in 2018 came the movie that would completely change his life. Aquaman. Aquaman, the movie that no one expected to be a success. When Jason Momoa was chosen to play Aquaman, many people had their doubts. After all, before him, Aquaman was not taken seriously. In the comics, the hero was always portrayed as an athletic king, but with blonde hair, wearing a vibrant orange and green uniform. The public could not imagine Jason Momoa as this character. But James Wan, the film's director, had a plan. He wanted to transform Aquaman into a true warrior, a legendary king of the seas. And for that, Jason Momoa was the perfect choice. Jason brought his Hawaiian and Polynesian essence to the character. From the way he spoke to his combat moves, everything about Aquaman was influenced by the warrior culture of the Pacific. When Aquaman premiered, no one imagined that the film would become a global phenomenon. But what happened was unbelievable. The film grossed over $1 billion worldwide. It became the biggest success in the history of DC Comics and cinema. It turned Jason Momoa into a Hollywood star. Now Jason was no longer just a TV actor. He was an action star, a leading man. He had earned the respect of the industry. But beyond the success, there was something much bigger behind this film. The connection between Aquaman and Jason Momoa's culture. One of the reasons why Jason fell in love with the role of Aquaman was because he felt he could represent his Hawaiian roots. During filming, he said that for him the ocean has always been sacred. From an early age, Jason learned from his family about the importance of the ocean, about the spiritual connection that the Hawaiian people have with water. And he brought that identity to the character. When Jason played Aquaman, he wasn't just being a generic hero. He was showing the world the strength and culture of his people. And that authenticity was one of the reasons why audiences loved the film so much. But now that he had finally reached the top, what would be the next challenge? Jason knew that success in Hollywood could be fleeting. He needed to keep working hard to ensure that his career wasn't just a phase, but something lasting. And that's when new challenges, new opportunities, and, of course, new risks came along. What did Jason Momoa do after becoming one of the biggest stars in cinema? Could he maintain his success? Or would new obstacles arise along the way? Beyond the screen, the defender of nature. Now imagine that you finally achieved everything you ever dreamed of. You became one of the most famous actors in the world, starred in a billion-dollar movie, and now everyone knows who you are. But for Jason Momoa, success was never just about money or fame. There was something much bigger that he wanted to do. Something that had always been in his heart since he was a child. He wanted to use his voice to protect the planet. A love for nature since childhood. Since childhood, Jason learned from his father and his ancestors to respect the earth and the ocean. Hawaii, his homeland, is a sacred place for his people. There, the sea is not just a beautiful scenery, it is life, it is culture, it is spirituality. And Jason knew that if the oceans died, the entire planet would suffer. So when he finally became famous, he decided he would use that fame for a greater cause. He became an environmental activist. The fight against ocean plastic. One of the first major movements Jason supported was the fight against ocean plastic. He set out to alert the world to a serious problem. Millions of tons of plastic are killing marine life every year. Plastic bottles, straws, bags, they all end up in the ocean. And Jason Momoa didn't just want to talk about it. He wanted to do something real. So in 2019 he did something surprising. He shaved his beard for the first time in 7 years to raise awareness about the problem. He recorded a video of himself shaving his beard and saying, "I'm shaving my beard to save the planet. We need to make a change. Plastic is destroying our oceans." The video went viral around the world. But Jason didn't stop there. He created his own brand of canned water called Mananalu, which encourages people to stop using plastic bottles. His idea was simple. If people used more aluminum instead of plastic, less trash would end up in the ocean. Defending indigenous communities. In addition to fighting for the oceans, Jason has also always used his voice to support indigenous peoples. He often says that native peoples understand the importance of nature better than anyone else, but they are the ones who suffer the most from environmental destruction. He has participated in protests against big companies that threaten indigenous lands and even went to the UN to speak about the climate crisis. In his speech, he looked directly at world leaders and said, "The time for words is over. Now is the time for action. The ocean needs us." And it showed that Jason is not just an actor. He is a real-life warrior. The connection to his role as Aquaman. Interestingly, this fight for nature ended up connecting Jason even more with Aquaman. In the movies, he plays a king of the seas, a protector of the oceans. And in real life, he does exactly the same thing. This made him even more respected by the public. People began to admire him not only for what he does in the movies, but for what he does in real life. But at the same time, Jason knew that his career was still growing. He wanted to explore new projects, work on different films and series, show that he was more than just a comic book hero. And that's exactly what he did. In the following years, Jason Momoa began to venture into new challenges. And they were great. What were these new projects? And did he manage to maintain his success in Hollywood? The continued rise, new projects and challenges. Now imagine that you have already achieved everything you ever wanted. You have become a movie star, starred in a billion-dollar film, become a global icon and still use your voice to protect the planet. But does that mean you can relax and simply enjoy your success? If you are Jason Momoa, the answer is no. Because for him, the true warrior never stops fighting. Expanding his horizons, beyond Aquaman. After the overwhelming success of Aquaman 2018, Jason knew that he could not rely on just one role to stay on top. He needed to show the world that he was more than just a superhero of the seas. So he began to diversify his projects. See, 2019 to 2022. An ambitious series. Jason accepted the challenge of starring in Sea, a major Apple TV Plus production set in a dystopian future where all of humanity has lost their sight. He played Baba Voss, a fierce warrior who protects his family in a brutal world where sight is a myth. The series was a huge success and showed that Jason had a talent for intense dramatic roles. Dune, 2021. The science fiction universe. In 2021, Jason was cast in one of the most anticipated films of the decade. Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve. He played Duncan Idaho, a skilled warrior loyal to the protagonist Paul Atreides, Timothée Chalamet. Despite not being the main character, Jason shone in the role and won even more fans. Producing his own films. In addition to acting, Jason decided to become a producer. He began working behind the scenes, helping to create stories that really interested him. This gave him more freedom to choose authentic projects that represented his essence. But even with all these new projects, Jason knew that the world still expected more from him as Aquaman. Aquaman 2 in the future at DC. After the success of the first film, Jason returned to film Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, 2023. The film had production challenges, changes in the DC cinematic universe, and many uncertainties about the future of the character. Jason knew that the studio was undergoing transformations, and rumors began to emerge about whether he would continue as Aquaman or take on a new role in the DC universe. Fans began to speculate. Could he play Lobo, DC's space bounty hunter? Jason has never officially confirmed anything, but he has hinted that he would love to play the character in the future. And one thing was certain. Whether as Aquaman or as another character, Jason Momoa still had a lot to offer to the cinema. What's next? Jason has already made it clear that he wants to continue exploring new genres and challenging himself as an actor. He wants to tell stories that represent his culture, his origins, and his worldview. And at the same time, he remains firm in his fight for the protection of nature. Even as the years go by, Jason Momoa remains the same adventurous boy from Hawaii, who never fit into the mold and always sought something greater. But will he be able to reinvent himself and remain at the top of Hollywood? Or are there new twists and turns yet to come? The future, what's next? Now stop and think, what makes a true warrior? It's not just physical strength. It's not just fame. It's the determination to never give up no matter how many obstacles come your way. And if there's anyone who embodies that, it's Jason Momoa. From a Hawaiian boy who grew up in rural America. From a model who became an actor who spent years fighting for recognition. From a man who suffered rejection, failure, and even a brutal attack. He never gave up. And today Jason Momoa is a legend. He's become a movie star, a DC hero, an environmentalist, and a true symbol of perseverance. But the journey isn't over yet. Fans are now eagerly awaiting to see what his next move will be. Will he continue as Aquaman in the new phase of DC? Will we see Jason playing Lobo, one of the most brutal characters in comics? Or will he surprise everyone and follow a completely new path? If there's one thing we've learned from Jason Momoa, it's that he always surprises us. So if you want to keep following this story, don't miss the next updates. Now tell me, what is your favorite Jason Momoa role? Do you think he's better suited to Aquaman or Lobo? And of course, subscribe to the channel, like it, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any content about the biggest stars in cinema.